from Srila Prabhupada, lilamrita. And welcome, devotees. I didn't think we'd get any of you. I thought you'd be too busy. But you're welcome, and you can have 2 cushions if you want. If you want to appear to be more austere, just use one. Okay. Or you can use 3 even. Right. Here we go. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadi Shatarne Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchkalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So devotees, where are we? Moscow. That's right. And who remembers what was the last thing that happened? It was... Huh? No. The very last thing. Yes. Shamsunda met someone who said, "Oh, I'm very interested, I'd like to meet you." And Prabhupada said, "No, he's a policeman. Don't go." Okay, so here we go, devotees. One day, 2 young men, one the son of an Indian diplomat stationed in Moscow, the other a young Muscovite, were loitering near Red Square when they saw an amazing sight. Out of the usual regimented routine of city traffic, a tall young man with a shaved head, a long reddish ponytail, and flowing white robes approached. It was Shamsunda. Familiar with Shamsunda's dress, the son of the Indian diplomat stopped him. Shamsunda smiled. "Hare Krishna, brother." And he began talking with the Indian, whose name was Narayan. The Russian, Ivan, knew a little English and followed the conversation as closely as he could. The talk grew serious. "Why don't you come up and meet my spiritual master?" Shamsunda said. Honored, the boys immediately accompanied Shamsunda to the Hotel National. When they arrived, they found Prabhupada seated on his bed, aglow and smiling, Aravinda massaging his feet. Shamsunda entered, offering obeisances before Prabhupada. Ivan was completely fascinated. "Come on," Prabhupada said, and the 3 of them sat at Prabhupada's feet. Turning first to Narayan, Prabhupada asked his name and his father's occupation. Narayan liked Prabhupada and offered to bring him green vegetables. His father, being highly placed at the Indian embassy, had produce flown in from India. Right. Ivan was interested even more than his Indian friend. And Prabhupada began explaining to him the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, while Narayan helped by translating. Ivan inquired with respect and awe, and Prabhupada answered his questions, teaching us much basic information about Krishna consciousness as was possible in one sitting. Prabhupada explained the difference between the spirit soul and the body, and described the soul's eternal relationship with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He spoke of Bhagavad Gita, of his network of temples around the world, and of his young men and women disciples, all practicing Bhakti Yoga. Prabhupada mentioned his desire to preach in Russia, which was a great field for Krishna consciousness because the people were open-minded and hadn't been polluted by sense gratification. He wanted to produce Krishna conscious literature in Russia through a library or a reading room, or in whatever way possible. Krishna conscious philosophy, he said, should be taught to Russia's most intelligent people. But because of government restrictions, it would have to be done discreetly. Devotees would not be able to sing and dance in the streets, but they could chant quietly together in someone's home. Prabhupada then began singing very quietly, leading the boys in kirtan. Ivan's taking to Krishna was like a hungry man's eating a meal. After several hours, however, he and his friend had to go. They would return the next day. Shamsundar began spending time with Ivan and Narayan. Ivan, a student of Oriental philosophies, was very intelligent and eager to know what was going on in the outside world. He was fond of the Beatles, and Prabhupada told him of his association with George Harrison and John Lennon. Ivan and Shamsundar had long talks about the ambitions and hopes of young people outside Russia. And Shamsundar explained to him how Krishna consciousness was the topmost of all spiritual paths. Shamsundar also taught him basic principles of Bhakti Yoga, such as chanting the prescribed 16 rounds of japa daily, and gave him his own copy of Bhagavad Gita as it is. The Prabhupada showed Ivan how to prepare chapatis and rice, and asked him to give up eating meat. Joyfully, Ivan accepted the chanting, the new way of eating everything. Ivan was being trained so that after Prabhupada left, Ivan could continue on his own. Ivan would be able to feel himself changing and advancing in spiritual life. And after practicing for some time, he could be initiated. Ivan said he would tell his friends about Krishna consciousness. With only 2 days left in Moscow, Prabhupada taught Ivan as much as he could. In this young Russian's eagerness and intelligence, Prabhupada found the real purpose of his visit to Russia. Prabhupada gave the analogy that when cooking rice, the cook need test only 1 grain to determine whether the whole pot of rice is done. Similarly, by talking with this one Russian youth, Prabhupada could tell that the Russian people were not satisfied in their so-called ideal land of Marxism. Just as Ivan was keenly receptive to Krishna consciousness, millions of other Russians would be also. Chanakya Pandit says that one blooming flower can refresh a whole forest, and that a fire in a single tree can burn the whole forest. From the Marxist point of view, Ivan was the fire that would spread Krishna consciousness to others, thus defeating the communist ideology. And from Prabhupada's point of view, he was the aromatic flower that would lend its fragrance to many others. Prabhupada's visit to Russia was no obscure interlude, but had become an occasion for planting the seed of Krishna consciousness in a destitute land. Srila Prabhupada had brought the movement of Lord Caitanya to yet another country. Caitanya Mahaprabhu himself had predicted that the Sankirtan movement would go to every town and village. Yet for hundreds of years, that prediction had remained unfulfilled. Prabhupada, however, in the few years since his first trip to America in 1965, had again and again planted Lord Chaitanya's message in one unlikely place after another. And of all places, this was perhaps the most unlikely. During a brief government-supervised visit to Moscow, he had planted the seed of Krishna consciousness within the Soviet Union. He was like the needle, and everyone and everything connected with him was like the thread that would follow. Professor Kotovsky had remarked that Prabhupada's stay in an old-fashioned hotel would not prove very interesting. But Prabhupada, unknown to Professor Kotovsky, was transcendental to Moscow or any other place in the material world. Prabhupada had come to this place, and Krishna had sent a sincere soul to him to receive the gift of Krishna consciousness. This had happened not by devious espionage against the Soviet government, but by the presence of Krishna's pure devotee and his natural desire to satisfy Krishna by preaching. In response to Prabhupada's pure desire, Krishna had sent one boy, and from that one boy, the desire would spread to others. Nothing, not even an iron curtain, could stop Krishna consciousness. The soul's natural function was to serve Krishna, and Krishna's natural will, Hare Krishna, welcome. And Krishna's natural will was to satisfy the pure desires of his devotee. In a farewell letter to Professor Kotovsky, Prabhupada tried to encourage further correspondence. Quote, "You wanted to see the manuscripts of my lectures, therefore I'm sending herewith an introduction to the lectures, and if you so desire, I shall be glad to send essays on these subjects. 1. Vedic conceptions of socialism and communism. 2. Scientific values of classless society. 3. Knowledge by authoritative tradition." Unquote. I mean, you must know, or at least try to understand, how incredibly restrictive it was. Just fantastically restrictive. Oh yeah, unbelievable. I mean, just another world altogether of restrictiveness. In a letter to Tamal Krishna, Prabhupada summed up his Moscow visit, quote, The city is well planned. There are big, big houses and roads, and at daytime the streets are busy with buses, cars, and underground trains, which are far better than American or English. The underground streets are very neat and clean. The surface streets are also daily washed. But there is some difficulty in collecting vegetarian foodstuffs. Still, we are cooking our meals by the cooker, which has saved our lives. We talked with one big professor, Mr. Kotovsky, and Shamsunda talked with many great writers and musicians. 2 boys are working with us, one Indian and one Russian. So there is good prospect for opening a center, although the atmosphere is not very good. The embassy was no help. So our visit to Moscow was not so successful, but for the future it is hopeful. Tomorrow I go to Paris for 1 day, then to San Francisco Rath Yatra, and then I shall come back to London. Prabhupada's getting around. 1 day Paris, San Francisco. That's a long way. From Paris it's like almost 11 hours, maybe 11 hours difference or something. And then back to London, sure. Paris, June 25th, 1971. Srila Prabhupada was lying on the couch in the conference room of the Indian tourist office, having just come from Orly Airport. Hare Krishna, welcome. I thought you were too busy. Yeah, use 2, use 3. Right, okay. Aradhana and his wife, Shantanu, had come with him in the taxi and were the only others in the room. Since there was to be a press conference later, Prabhupada said he wanted to rest, and he closed his eyes. At the airport, Paris immigration officials had detained Prabhupada, while some 30 European devotees, none of whom had ever met him, had waited anxiously. They had glimpsed him as he had walked from the plane to the terminal building, and they had watched him carrying his sannyas danda with umbrella strapped to it. He had waved to them holding up his bead bag, but then he had been kept from them just behind a thin wall until finally, after 2 hours, Paris immigration had allowed him through. Yeah, I got stopped once going into Paris, dressed as a devotee. Not for 2 hours, but probably half an hour, something like that. They didn't know what to do. I had a few experiences like that. Singapore, me and Parthasarathi Maharaj stopped for maybe 15, 20 minutes just standing there. Then they let us in. But then once I mentioned in Russia, in Siberia, sort of central Siberia, I was going to, just for an internal flight, just walking through dressed like this, and they stopped me. The security stopped me and started speaking. And they had first they asked, document. You have to show your passport. And they saw I'm a foreigner. So then they spoke to me in Russian, and I replied in Russian. And they said in Russian, oh, on говорит по-русски, which means, oh, he speaks Russian. And then they let me go. But once, anyway, yeah, okay. Undercover, 007. I tell you what, gosh, going into Qatar, wow. Totally. We were going in, me and Satchikumar Prabhu, and he was in kami clothes with tilak on. So I got him to wash his tilak off just with, on the spot. Hare Krishna. The Paris devotees had not arranged a car for Prabhupada. So when he had asked for one, several devotees had run off to hail a taxi. When the taxi had arrived, Prabhupada, along with Aradhana and Shantanu, had started, I think they got the names mixed up. Shantanu is a man's name, and Aradhana is more often a woman's name. Anyway, they'd started for the Indian tourist office, leaving the others to join him later. After a brief rest, Prabhupada opened his eyes and saw Aradhana, Shantanu, and Shamsundar in the room. The other devotees and the press would be arriving soon. As Prabhupada sat up, Shantanu offered him some mango, and Srila Prabhupada smiled. Did you see that mango I was given this morning? Okay, yeah, that was it looked really good. Right, okay, but not tomorrow morning, right? Okay, where are we? So, okay, Prabhupada smiled. Yogeshwar, I sat outside the door to Prabhupada's room, eating the peel of the mango Prabhupada had eaten. When Prabhupada was in Bhaktivedanta Manor, Prabhupada had a particular, just say. He liked oranges where you cut them in, say, 4 or maybe 8 pieces with skin on. And then he would suck the juice out. With the skins on, he'd suck the juice out. So, you get all the fibers and the skin. And we would be sitting outside Prabhupada's door, and we would get the orange skins with the fibers and eat the whole thing. Yeah, got to get the mercy, I tell you what. My heart, so this is Yogeshwar, my heart was pounding, and I had no idea what it was going to be like after having been initiated for 1.5 years and having never met my spiritual master personally. But now, knowing that he was just behind the door, then Shamsundar opened the door and peered out and saw me sitting there. He stuck his head back inside the door and said, "There's a devotee here. Shall I let him in now, Srila Prabhupada?" I peeked around the door, and Srila Prabhupada, who had been lying down on the couch, was now sitting up with his hand on his knee, very solidly, like a royal, majestic look. He responded to Shamsundar's question by motioning with his hand that we could all come in. It was the first perfect thing. It was the first perfect thing I'd ever seen in my life. That one gesture. So I came in and immediately fell flat on the floor. And then I understood that now I am with my spiritual master. Gradually the devotees began arriving from the airport, and Yogeshwar, is still very active devotee. He's actually American. He's in America now. He was staying in France or Switzerland or France for some time. Right, okay. Gradually, the devotees began arriving from the airport, and they came into Prabhupada's room. The press also arrived as Prabhupada spoke warmly and pleasantly with his followers, encouraging them in their preaching and telling them of his own recent preaching in Moscow. Hardly any of the devotees had ever been with their spiritual master before, and Lochanananda began introducing them to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Vilas, who's also a very active devotee now. I arrived late, and when I came in, I was mixed up with surprise, with elation, with egotistical pride, and with amazement that the Lord's pure devotee was there. I walked in with Ganesham, the boy who had started translating some of Prabhupada's books into French. The room was almost filled, and Ganesham immediately sat down in the back. I was the president of the temple, and I was very proud and puffed up about it. So I made my way all the way up to the front where Srila Prabhupada was, and I sat down right next to him. I looked at him, expecting him to look at me and smile or something, some recognition, but he didn't look at me at all. Lochanananda was introducing all the devotees to Prabhupada. Lochanananda said, "This is Ganesham. He is the translator." Prabhupada said, "Where is he?" And everyone looked around to Ganesham in the back. Prabhupada said, so this is still Hari Vilas speaking. "This is Ganesham. He is the translator." Okay, yeah, so everyone looked around to Ganesham in the back. Prabhupada said, "Let him stand up, please." Ganesham stood, and Prabhupada looked at him and smiled and said, "Oh, thank you very much." Right then I felt a little funny. I sat there wondering, what have I done? I've walked all the way up to the front, and I'm expecting so much recognition. Then Lochanananda said, "This is Hari Vilas. He is the president of the temple." Prabhupada didn't even look at me. and I knew, yes, I had made a big mistake. I began to realize this is my spiritual master. Because immediately he'd acted in such a way as to point out a great fault in me. Unquote. Okay, just a sec. Let's just carry on for a few minutes. Reporters began questioning, and Prabhupada patiently answered them, taking advantage of their sometimes superficial questions to elaborate on the philosophy of Krishna consciousness and explain the Krishna consciousness movement. The conference ran 1 hour. As Prabhupada left the Indian tourist office, he found that there was no car to take him to the temple. While several devotees ran around trying to find a taxi, Prabhupada waited, standing before a sidewalk cafe. Thinking that Prabhupada must be tired from the rigorous press conference and his long flight from Moscow, one of the devotees asked, "Srila Prabhupada, would you like to sit here for a minute?" And the devotee pulled one of the cafe chairs out away from its table. "What is this place?" Prabhupada asked. "This is a sidewalk cafe," the devotee replied. "What do people do here? Do they smoke and drink?" "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, it's a cafe. They serve alcoholic beverages." "No," Prabhupada replied. "Guru cannot sit in such a place." When Prabhupada reached the temple, he bathed and took prasadam. The next day he was scheduled to leave for Los Angeles, and his one day in Paris was filled with outside engagements, he rested and again went out to preach. The devotees had rented the Olympia Theatre, a large auditorium meant to seat more than 2,000. But because the devotees had advertised Prabhupada's lecture only 2 days in advance, only 40 people attended. Prabhupada was undaunted, and he lectured and held kirtan. Afterward, he went to a television studio for an interview. You know, Hari Vilas organized that, who was just speaking, and who I know pretty well. And Hari Vilas tells, because the Olympia was the top place in Paris. And you know, Paris is like super stylish, you know, very fashionable and all that. And the Olympia Theatre was the best in the city, in the country probably. So Hari Vilas went in there and met with the manager and said, you know, the guru of the Beatles is coming. And we want to use your theatre. Yeah. And the manager said, really? Are the Beatles going to come too? And Hari Vilas said, yes. Which was not exactly accurate. And Hari Vilas said, yeah, there'll be a lot of people, a lot of big people, important people. And we want to use the theatre for free, because normally it would cost really thousands and thousands to use it. And the manager said, yes, of course, you can use it for free. But it was only a couple of days before, as we read, and only about 40 people came. Such is life. By the time Prabhupada returned to the temple, okay, so Prabhupada was undaunted, only 40 people attended, and he lectured and held kirtan. Afterward, he went to a television studio for an interview. By the time Prabhupada returned to the temple, it was 1 a.m. Shamsundar told the devotees who had all accompanied Prabhupada during the day that they should rest a full 6 hours before rising. But the next morning Prabhupada rose as usual, and at 5 o'clock he was demanding to know why there was no Mangal Arati. He sent his servant to wake the devotees, and as the devotees were hurrying to the temple room to begin their morning worship, Prabhupada was going out on his morning walk. Accompanying Prabhupada on his walk was Shamsundar Aravinda and the Paris temple president, Hari Vilas. The spring morning was sunny, and Prabhupada, walking with his cane, appeared noble. Shamsundar, Prabhupada asked, why are all the householders in Maya? How's that for a good question? Why are all the householders in Maya? When Shamsundar couldn't reply, Prabhupada said, that's all right. That is their position, to be in Maya. He said that when he had gone to America, his plans had been to make sannyasis, but when he saw the free mixing of the sexes in the West, he had decided to let his disciples first get married and have a child, and then the wife could go to Vrindavan with the child, and the husband could take sannyas. Prabhupada laughed. Man becomes entangled by his family, he said, by his home, his bank account, his animals, and so many other attachments. Near the end of his walk, Prabhupada spoke specifically of Paris. 3 things are prominent here, he said: wine, women, and money. What do you think, Hari Vilas? Is this a fact? Because Hari Vilas is also American. Hari Vilas replied, yes, Prabhupada, this is definitely a fact. Wine, women, and money. Prabhupada said that although these attachments were very strong, the Krishna consciousness movement could overcome their influence. Prabhupada said that the houses in the Paris suburb, with their attractive fenced-in yards, maybe in the Paris suburbs, with their attractive fenced-in yards, were excellent, but everything was being wasted for sense gratification. Although a French gentleman may have such a first-class house, garden, wife, bank account, and car, he has no spiritual knowledge. Therefore, he would always remain attached to his first-class possessions, and at the end of his life, his great attachment would lead him to take birth as a cockroach, or rat, or dog within that same house. As Prabhupada and the devotees continued walking, Prabhupada asked Hari Vilas how he thought the temple's preaching was faring. Hari Vilas said he thought it would be successful, but that it might be a good idea to make extra income by starting a business. Your business is preaching, Prabhupada said. If there are some householders, they can do business. When Prabhupada and his party arrived at the temple, they found the devotees eagerly waiting for Prabhupada's morning Bhagavatam lecture. But there was no time. Prabhupada had to leave at once for the airport. He was returning to America. Hare Krishna. Any comments, questions, points? We're just finishing the chapter, actually. That's the end of chapter 34. Any questions, comments? Marie, you're our questioner.
Do you think the same restrictive measures will return to Russia after this war?
Do I think the same restrictive measures will return to Russia after this war? I really doubt it, because the people, they're just so used to, the materialistic way of life. They are really so used to it. Hare Krishna. That's my opinion. Comments, questions, words of wisdom? Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.